Good afternoon, folks, and happy Wednesday. Reggie Rhodes coming to you here the day before Thanksgiving. And I don't know about you folks, but I definitely enjoy some Thanksgiving. It's not much better than family, food, and nap time. But I'm kind of coming to you today with a little bit of a different video than I normally do. As you can tell, I am not at the ranch today. But I figured I would basically kind of give you an overview of what led me down the road to purchasing some property and trying to learn a little bit about homesteading. You know, I would say that up until 2020, and we all know what happened in 2020, I'm going to be careful what I say because seems like people sometimes get into a little bit of trouble for talking about what kind of took place between, say, 2020 and 2022. I think it's kind of still lingering a little bit today, but I think that was the first time that I realized how fragile our supply chain is. And I think it was also maybe the time in my life when I realized that maybe nobody was coming to save us if something should happen. I don't know much about growing food and being a homesteader. I've always relied on the, modern convenience of grocery stores and gas stations and fast food and Uber Eats. But I think the first time that I feel like I ever dang near had a panic attack was somewhere in the early 2020s when I walked into not one, but three different grocery stores, and there was hardly any food on the shelf. And that lasted for a week. I mean, I would say a week because I went back, a couple days in a row. I kind of gathered what I could get and then kind of went back a couple days later and tried to gather up some more stuff. But I think it was the first time that I realized how reliant I am with the modern commodities of the world, you know. Um, and again, like I said, I think it was the first time I thought I was ever about to have a panic attack. But it was about that time that I decided that I needed to find myself a little bit of land and see if I could learn how to do some of this stuff that I watch a lot of videos. I watch Shane and Jamie, and they've got a little homestead and they collect eggs and, cut firewood, and they have chickens and all that. And I think the reality is that even with a little bit of land, people are able to grow their own food. And there's a couple people I watch that all they really have is their backyard, and they're growing peppers, and they've got apple trees and things of that nature. And you kind of start to go down that rabbit hole a little bit. You kind of start to realize that folks, we're only maybe a little over 100 years, maybe about 100 years out from when everybody had some sort of a farm, some sort of a garden. I remember my grandparents, when I was young, they had a really big garden. They had tomatoes and peppers, and they would go down almost daily and pick some tomatoes and other vegetables, and that's what the majority of their dinners and lunches and breakfasts were made up of. And I feel like we have really kind of, as a society, we have really kind of put ourselves in this situation where we rely so much on the grocery stores and the gas stations and, central air and central heating and all that stuff that I think there's a lot of people that would be in trouble if things went wrong and we had no choice but to get back to living off the land and living in caves and all that other stuff that, in all honesty, is probably a little less expensive than what we're dealing with now. You know, I feel like we kind of lose sight of the fact that we basically need three things to survive. And I'm sure there's four or five that a couple others that would come in really handy, but food, water, and shelter. We need to be able to eat, and we need to be able to have water. We need to, have some sort of shelter to keep us warm and out of the rain. And we have really gotten comfortable with all the modern amenities in the world that I think a lot of people would have a whole bunch of trouble if something were to go wrong. And again, going back to 2020, I think I realized how fragile our supply chain is. I work in logistics, and the company I work for, we get most of our stuff shipped out of China. And around that time, we had containers out there floating around in the ocean on ships for months at a time because there was nobody here to work, and they had everybody staying at home, and it impacted my business, which has nothing to do with food or any of that. But it really set us back. And then again, like I say, going back to the grocery store, like not having anything on the shelves. Could you imagine if that were to continue for, say, a month, 2 months? Can you imagine if the power grid went down tomorrow, how so many people would probably just panic and break out into chaos because they would have no idea what to do. And I'm honestly probably one of those people. I understand a little bit. I understand that I could go chop down a tree and make a fire if I needed to, but I've never grown anything. I've never had chicken so I can get eggs and have me, some scrambled eggs for breakfast. And I think that all those things that were going through my head made me decide that I wanted to get going on a different path and start to learn how to homestead, how to be a little bit more self-sufficient, self-reliable, rather than hoping that somebody's going to come and save me if things were to go wrong. And so I looked for land for probably two or 3 years before I found the spot that I'm in now. And it's 12 acres, and it's a lot of work, and there's still so much that has to be done out there. But at the same time, I feel like I've at least put myself in a situation maybe where I have somewhere to go should things go sideways. And my hopes are that once we start rolling around and getting back into spring, that I'm going to build a couple garden beds. I'm going to try to teach myself and learn from some of you folks out there that I watch, and probably talk to Shane and Jamie a little bit about chickens and things like that, because I feel like if things kind of keep going the way that they're going, and look, I always kind of thought everything's going to be fine. I watched something the other day that kind of blew my mind, that the interest on the national debt, on the national debt of the United States of America, the interest is greater than the whole military budget. And that if things keep going that way and our country keeps borrowing money, unless we go full Genghis Khan we're going to be in trouble in a few years, folks. I'm not trying to be too dramatic here, but it makes sense. You can't keep borrowing money if you can't pay it back. If eventually somebody's going to come knocking on the door wanting that money. But the way that the rest of that conversation went was that AI is going to basically take over many digital jobs, data entry, banking, things that a lot of people are doing right now that they're not going to need those people. They're going to have AI robots doing it, you know. And kind of what I understood about it is like maybe that most of the physical labor jobs, which luckily the job I'm in is kind of physical labor. You got to put your hands on stuff and move stuff around. That maybe that's a little bit farther down the line, but they seem to believe that that's the only thing that's going to bring us out of debt. That's going to actually get us back to where we might not go broke in a couple of years. And hey, maybe it doesn't happen in a couple of years. Maybe it happens in 10 years. I hope it is closer to 10, 20 years down the road, because I think that'll give everybody a little bit of time to start focusing on, hey, I need to learn how to grow my own food. Hey, I need to be able to go outside and collect some eggs should the supply chain go down again. I don't normally go down and into the rabbit holes on this channel. I like to kind of keep it simple and lighthearted. But there is a lot going on in the world out there that really probably makes me a little bit more nervous than even I was in 2020. So with all that being said, some of the stuff I watch, it tells us all the problems that are going on, but there doesn't ever seem to be any kind of solutions. And the first thing that popped into my mind was that, folks, it wasn't that long ago that we were so much more self-reliant, that we had farms and we had animals and we had the things that we needed, the food, water, and shelter to survive without going to the grocery store. And the reality is that if we want prices to go down on gas, if we want prices to go down at the grocery store, we have to stop going to the grocery stores and buying food and going to the gas station and filling our gas tanks up. And again, I know that's so much easier said than done. They've kind of got us in this trap, if you will, to where you go look at an apartment here in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and not even a very great part of town, maybe 2 bedrooms and a bath. You're looking at somewhere between $900 and $1,200 a month. Ooh, there's a lot of people that don't have jobs that make that kind of money. They've also kind of trapped us into this idea that if you don't have a college degree, you can't get one of those jobs that are paying you enough money to live, to go to the grocery store and eat. And the fact is that I think that's where they want us. They want us putting money on our credit cards and getting into debt and basically trapping us in the loop. And, I think what's going to happen is there's going to have to be a large population of people that decide they're going to take whatever little land that they have, whatever square footage of backyard that they can use, to start growing their own food, to start raising their own chickens and cattle. And again, I none of that, all of that is easier said than done. I don't know enough about it to do it. If something were to happen tomorrow, I'd be in trouble. I know just enough to probably have myself a fire and maybe enough food hidden away in my cabinet to last me a couple of weeks, and that's if I could make my cans of soup last a couple of days a piece. But I think that if we're ever going to get back to an affordable society, because folks, I don't think prices are going to go down. I don't think uh, I don't think things are going to get cheaper as time goes by. I think if anything, it's going to get so expensive that we're going to have more people getting on the SNAP benefits and basically having to have the SNAP benefits and the Section 8 housing and all that stuff that basically the government is taking care of us. And I think that we as a society have to decide if we're more afraid to go back to the woods, go back to the caves, and learn how to become a little bit more self reliant and a little less reliant on the grocery stores and the gas stations. There has to be enough of us to do it to where they have no choice but to lower the prices. I had a teacher many, many years ago, back when I lived in New York, actually, who said if you want the gas prices to go down, you have to have a certain percentage of people who stop going to the gas station for a couple of weeks. And it makes sense. It's everything's supply and demand. And we have gotten a lot more demanding with what we want. There's a lot of folks out there that would rather have the new iPhone than maybe put some away and go get you some MREs or get you a little acre of land that maybe you can go out there and grow stuff and have some chickens and start off, small. And I think that they need to start teaching this stuff in schools, and they're not going to. If anything, I think they're going to just continue to teach people that you got to go, you got to go to college. You got to go in debt getting you a college degree and then hope there's some job out there for you. And you know what? If there's not, give us a call. We'll give you a credit card so that you owe us more money. Give us a call. We'll get you on we'll get you on the benefits where you're basically locked into a certain amount of money a month, and you've got to figure out how to make that money last for a month and hope that the grocery prices don't get so high that even that doesn't help you any. With all that being said, and again, these aren't the kind of videos I normally do, and I doubt I'll do very many videos like this, but I think I see a lot of things coming in the future that probably many of us see, that if things don't change, if we don't become less afraid to get out there and get our hands dirty and cut our own wood, raise our own food, collect our own water, that it's going to get so expensive out there that there's going to be a lot of folks out there that are not going to be able to survive. So I appreciate anybody who's watching this. I'm sorry it was such kind of a dark rabbit hole, but for me personally, I feel like I'm ready to learn to do as much of this stuff as I can and become less needy as far as grocery stores, gas stations, and fast food and all that goes. Because the other thing is, folks, I don't know that any of that stuff we go buy at grocery stores or fast food places, I don't know that any of it's good for us. At least if we're growing it ourselves, we know who's touched it. We know there's not a whole bunch of crap in there that's not any good for us. And I think that's another thing. We become healthier as a society, and we don't need all this health insurance and all this stuff that they basically get us roped into getting, that takes a little bit more money out of our pocket. And then when the time comes and you actually need to go to the hospital or a doctor, you still get hit with some sort of a charge. And they're not going to make any money if they make us all better, so that's not going to be their game plan. With all that being said, there used to be a day and a time, folks, where we lived off the land. We were a lot more self-sufficient. And until we can get back to those days, we're going to be stuck in this loop of hoping that we got enough money to get through the month, hoping that the lights stay on, hoping that the grocery store shelves are still full. And I am here to listen to any advice from anybody on how to do homesteading. I'm here to listen to any advice on what might help me reach my goal to be somewhat closer to, say, 75% more reliant upon myself than the gas stations, grocery stores, and fast food. I appreciate y'all tuning in and watching this. I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving. If it doesn't rain, which they're saying it will, I will be back down at the ranch this weekend. We're going to clean up the last little island I got out there. You guys have a great one. We will catch you next time.